School Ties is a 1992 drama directed by Robert Mandel. The film follows David Green, a Jewish high school senior who is awarded an athletics scholarship to an elite boarding school in Massachusetts. Here, David hides his Jewish identity to fit in with his peers, but quickly realizes just because you're accepted doesn't mean you belong. The film has an all-star cast with the likes of Brendan Fraser, Matt Damon, Chris O'Donnell, Amy Locane, Ben Affleck, and many others. So, let's take a look and examine the different parts that make up this very underrated powerhouse of a film. First, let's dive into the cinematography. Overall, I found it very enjoyable. It's very open and there's not a ton of different angles. There's quite a bit of movement in it, which reminds me of old Hollywood. The film takes advantage of this specifically in establishing shots. Another thing that is done is the use of close-ups and medium shots for conversation. Over and over, the film gives us an establishing shot, then goes into close-ups of each character as they're back and forth with dialogue, and I really like how that flows. The last thing that really stood out to me was the use of slow-mo. It's a very 90s touch to the film, but I like it because it kind of helps flesh out and dramatize some important moments in the film. Overall, I think the cinematography worked really well for this film. It was very fluent and expressive without being over the top, so it's going to earn a score of 8. Now let's look at editing. Overall, I think this film was paced very well. I didn't feel like it got stuck anywhere or that it was slow or sluggish. I like how it kept tension and tense moments. I enjoyed the relaxed, fluid pace when there were sweet, tender moments. And I like how energetic and engaging it was during the football games. Conversation, for the most part, was kept very tight with close-ups and lots of reaction shots that evoke emotion. Overall, I enjoyed the editing very much. It was paced well and it did its job for the film, so it's gonna earn a score of 8. Next up, lighting. Overall, there was nothing special about this lighting, but it did do its job. It was very realistic, it was very natural, and there wasn't any harsh shadows or shading. It's very subtle. For example, when David and Charlie are on the dock talking, how there's a little bit of light on one side of their face. It's meant to represent the moon. And something that was a little offbeat that I enjoyed was the use of paper lanterns or china balls in the dance scene. Overall, there's nothing really special about the lighting, but it does serve its purpose in the film, so it's gonna earn a score of 6. Next up, color grading. The color scheme in this film plays a big role in how it's received. There's minimal color, it's been desaturated, it's targeted more for authenticity, it's not about things that you necessarily see in the film, but more or less the performances and what the film is about. Overall, it's enjoyable. I think it fit the 50s world that the film is set in, so it's going to earn a score of 7. Next up, acting. There's a lot of notable stars in this film that were up and coming. It was cast really well. I think everyone fit to their characters, no one necessarily seemed out of place, and each character seemed fleshed out. Fraser did really well as David Green. There's a lot of emotions in this film, there's a wide range that needed to be covered in this film, and I think Fraser did a good job at doing that. Matt Damon did well as Charlie Dillon. He gave him a good sense of humility and humanity, but doesn't necessarily let it justify his action. As far as some of the other cast members go, Chris O'Donnell gave a very subtle but rememberable performance. Randall Batinkoff gave a very sophisticated and thought-out performance, and the list just goes on and on and on. Overall, this is some of the best acting that I've seen from an ensemble cast. I enjoyed it a lot. There wasn't a performance that I felt missed a mark or felt out of place, so this is going to earn a score of 9. Next up, costumes and makeup. First up, I like how the costumes match the color grading. There's a lot of minimal color, so blacks, grays, browns. As far as the style of the clothing, it looks pretty accurate to the year, which was 1959. All the suits, they fit very well, so did the dresses, and the hair for the most part was on par as well. For the women, there was a lot of that like 50s curl and bob, and for the guys, most of their hair was slicked back or just cut very neatly. I think my biggest grievance was Brendan's hair. It was very poofy, it wasn't cut as clean, but this very well could have been done for a reason to make him stand out from the rest of the cast. Personally, I think it looks a little bit too 90s for the film, but it works for what it is. As far as makeup goes, everything was well done, and I like the continuity of the injury on David's head at the beginning of the film, how it goes from a cut to a bruise over the course of the film. Overall, it was well done, and it's going to earn a score of 8. Next up, sets. I'm no historian, but the sets look very accurate for 1959. The exteriors, the interiors, the cars, everything just seemed like it was 1959. It may not be 100% historically accurate, but it does sell it for the movie, so it's going to earn a score of 8. Next up, effects. Now for this category, it is both special effects and visual effects. I didn't really see any visual effects in the film that I could just outright point out, but there definitely was some practical ones. The biggest one that comes to mind is the rain. Now obviously it looks like in the scene where he's yelling cowards, that looks like real rain. But in the scene where the boys are walking into the school with umbrellas, that rain looks like it could have been fabricated. Also, towards the end of the film, there's snow on the ground. Whether that's real or not, I don't know, but I do know that if it's not real, it has to be fabricated, so that would be a practical effect. This is a very much an ensemble, story-driven piece, so there's not going to be a ton of effects to take away from what the cast is doing, but credit needs to be given, so this category is going to earn a 2. Next up, sound design. To be honest, I feel like this is the weakest spot in the film. The scoring and the soundtrack is beautiful, there's lots of orchestra swells, lots of emotional pieces. The Foley is well mixed, and of course there was some period piece songs in the film. Overall, I think the worst part of this is some of the absolute cringe sound effects. The punching sound effects, the water sound effects, and just a random fart sound effect is absolutely atrocious. I don't know if there wasn't a budget for better sound effects or if that's all they had, but just in particular, those moments when those sound effects are used, they really stand out in the film and not in a good way. I will say though, the score and the Foley mixed together really help build the tension and help the flow of this film go so smoothly. I like how in important conversations a lot of times there's no background music, instead it's just natural Foley of the environment that they're in. Overall, it does its job, but I have to deduct some points for those awful sound effects. So this is going to get a score of 5. Lastly, the mise en scene. I think the mise en scene is really well. It thoroughly helps tell the story, from the colors, to the acting, to the camera work. Everything is very intentional, and you can tell that there's a lot of thought and a lot of planning to incorporate all this into these scenes. I really have no grievances for this, so the score for mise en scene is going to be a 10. The overall score for School Ties is a 71. I think this is a fair score. It's a good film, it's a well thought out film. Not only is this an entertaining film, but it is enlightening, and as a filmmaker, there's a lot to learn from it.